Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a huge question. How do universal human rights, these big ideas cooked up in global conference rooms, actually work on the ground for people living in totally different cultures? Let's get into it. Okay, let's start here. Picture a United Nations conference hall. It's filled with diplomats, and believe it or not, they can spend days, sometimes weeks, arguing over single words and phrases like striving to or as soon as possible. Every single word you see here is a hard-fought political compromise. This is where global law is born. Now, let's jump thousands of miles away to a completely different world. This quote, well, it paints a picture of a place where ideas of harm, justice, and community mean something entirely different. You can see how the carefully chosen, sterile words of a UN document feel like they're from another planet compared to the lived reality of a widow facing an ordeal like this. So this is the puzzle we're really trying to piece together today. How do you possibly bridge this massive gap between the abstract, political language of international law and the very real, very complex lives of people in local communities? All right, so to really get a handle on this, we have to go back to that conference room and look a little closer at how these global rules get made in the first place. You know, this slide really pulls back the curtain. It's not about grand, soaring speeches. It's a super meticulous process called wordsmithing. You have these big coalitions of countries, like JustCans and the G77 group, and they literally negotiate every single word to come up with a text that everyone can agree to sign, even if they completely disagree on what it actually means.
Okay, check this out for a perfect example. One group wanted to say that globalization has been characterized by certain policies. Another group insisted the wording should be that it caused them. Now, that might sound like a tiny semantic difference, but politically, it's a huge deal. Caused implies blame, right? It means someone is responsible. Characterized by is way more neutral. The final document is just filled with these kinds of compromises.
So you have this language carefully hammered out in Geneva, and then it lands in a community where justice is guided by something totally different, a system we often just wrap up in one word, culture. But here's the thing. What do we even mean by culture? The experts we're looking at here don't see it as some ancient, immovable wall. They see culture as a living, breathing process. It's this dynamic, always changing set of habits and beliefs that people are constantly arguing about and reshaping. It's not a barrier to change. It's the very arena where change happens. And this is a brilliant example of that in action. So in Fiji, the official state law treats a crime like rape by focusing on punishing the individual offender. But there's also a traditional ceremony called the bulu bulu. And the goal of bulu bulu is totally different. It's not about punishment. It's about restoring peace and harmony between the two families through a formal apology. It sees the harm not just as a crime against one person, but as a tear in the social fabric of the whole community. So you've got these two totally different worlds, right? The universal, one-size-fits-all language of state law, and the super specific customs of local justice. How do you ever connect them? Well, the answer, it turns out, lies with a very special group of people. We call them translators. These are the local activists, the NGO leaders, the academics who go to the big UN meetings in New York. They learn the language of human rights, they get immersed in that world, and then they go home. And they face the really hard job of making those huge global ideas make sense to their neighbors and their own communities. And what they do is so much more than just, swapping words from one language to another. It's this deeply creative process. First, they have to frame these foreign ideas using local symbols and stories that people will actually understand. Second, they have to figure out how to make a program work within the local political and economic system. And third, and this is a big one, they often have to redefine the problem itself so it connects with local concerns. And what's fascinating is how this plays out. You take one big idea, like stop violence against women, and it looks completely different depending on where you are. In India, it leads to special police stations for dowry-related violence. In Hong Kong, activists used Confucian ideas to make women's rights more palatable. In China, it works through a huge state-run women's group. And in the US, the focus is all on the criminal justice system, restraining orders and police training. Same goal, totally different approaches. Okay, so this whole translation thing is absolutely crucial. But it's messy, it's not perfect, and it doesn't always lead to the kind of clear-cut justice that people at the UN might be hoping for. And this is where things get really tough. This observer in India saw a woman who had clearly been beaten, being pushed by the people at that special police cell to just go back and make up with her husband. Why? Because in that local context, the idea of a woman leaving her marriage just wasn't seen as a real option. The human rights idea got adapted to fit the local system. But in the process, its power to protect her kind of got watered down.
This really gets to the heart of the problem, the central tension in all of this. For a new human rights idea to get accepted, it has to feel familiar. It has to fit in with the way people already see the world. But for it to actually work, it has to challenge those very same ideas. If it's translated so well that it just blends in completely, it can lose its entire power to create change. It's a real catch-22. And so this leaves us with a really big open question. Is this messy, imperfect process of translation the only real way to make global justice happen? Or, in the process of trying to make a universal idea fit a local world, is something fundamental lost in translation? It's a tough one, and there's no easy answer.